Thank you so much for staying with us. This morning we are having a discussion on renewable energy and how countries can successfully transition from the use of fossil fuels. In studio we have Dr. Xavier Francis. He heads an institute, a whole energy institute at JKUAT, and therefore he's taking us through what countries need to do to transition without affecting their economies. Thank you for staying with us, Dr. All right, so we're looking at a situation where you even mentioned Ethiopia, that Ethiopia is doing really well in transitioning to green energy. They're utilizing one of their sources of clean power, clean energy. But when it comes to Kenya, or even Africa, we are a host, and our president has been making statements, and we can clearly see his commitments from the statements that he's been making in different conferences on why it's important to really address some of the factors affecting the climate action globally. So let's look at Kenya as a country, comparing us with let's just stay in Africa, other African countries, with what we have. Maybe what advantage do we have versus other countries, and are we fully making use of what we have really? Right.
Maybe if you make a comparative analysis of it, you find that Ethiopia has got huge resources in terms of hydro.
Hydro, right.
Kenya is not so much, comparatively less. But then Kenya has, on the upside, it has a huge development in terms of geothermal. So that kind of balances it out. And in fact, you find the GDC, the Geothermal Development Company in Kenya, has been given a tender to support Ethiopia in exploiting their geothermal resources. The other thing is that Kenya also has a lot of solar, has a lot of wind, and particularly for the wind part, it's because of the low-level Turkana jet wind that passes the northern part of the country, which means that we have one of the highest wind speeds in the world, about 10 meters per second at a 50 meter above ground level. So in terms of that, we have an opportunity. Solar, we are close to the equator, we are doing very well there. Our biggest challenge has been biomass, and it is a challenge that is affecting most African countries, because what we have is we have biomass resources, yes, but we focus on traditional biomass resources, unsustainable one, where we tend to just take the charcoal, as in take the firewood or convert it to charcoal, and that's where we end. And that's why there's been a push towards clean cooking stoves, which has been the investments outlay has been mostly on tier 2 and tier 4 clean cooking stoves. So tier 2 are like the improved cook stoves, the Kenya ceramic jiko and stuff, and then the tier 4 are like the ethanol stoves, the biogas stoves, and also maybe the LPG. So focusing on the biomass and on the biogas and the ethanol stove, we have companies like Cocoa, which has been pushing a lot towards changing the whole framework of people using ethanol. But then Cocoa imports the ethanol, which brings you to why can't we make our own ethanol? And the question then comes to the sugar industry. And you find the sugar industry has had let me say, a misdirection, if I may use it. In countries like Brazil, sugar is a byproduct. The main product, when they run their agricultural sector, the main product from the sugar sector is ethanol. So sugar for spicing up your tea, if you can call it that way, is a byproduct. In Kenya, the focus has been the sugar is the main product. Ethanol is a byproduct. So when you have this misdirection, when you can convert this and say, let's focus on the sugar, and we make ethanol as the main product, then you now are able to make people transition from unsustainable biomass to more sustainable cooking fuels like ethanol. And changing the whole framework. Biogas, we have a lot in terms of what we can use to convert organic matter into biogas. But then the challenge has been, how do you commercialize biogas? How do you take that biogas, clean it, containerize it, and sell it the same way you would sell LPG? You get? Yeah. So that is a research hurdle. But you see, the Western countries will be interested in funding that because it's not part of they don't use biogas as such for that purposes. But then within Kenya, we should fund that and see how we can translate that research into an actionable project. And so generally, in summary, in Kenya, we are blessed to have almost all kinds of renewable. Most countries are not blessed like that. You know, Rwanda might have, Congo might have a lot of rivers, but they don't have that amount of sunshine that we have. Yeah. Wind, we have a lot of wind, but if you compare it with maybe, let's say, Rwanda or Uganda, it's not that much. So as a country, we have a lot of this. Yeah. But we have not leveraged ourselves in such a way that we are able to transition the whole economy to make use of these renewables. Yeah, and the problem is that it's not that people are not willing to transition. You mentioned that lack of alternatives was one of the problems, but I'll also add another problem, which is the cost. For example, when you look at the cost of installing the solar panels versus paying the monthly electricity bill, you find that let's say you pay 2,000 or 1,000 or even 500 electricity bill. I know as an expert will say, how much will you pay in 2 years or 3 years? But people do not have that kind of money, for instance, to just like buy a solar panel which costs hundreds of thousands. What should the government do to really support families and to successfully transition without having to deal with the cost and running away from transitioning because they say it's very expensive to transition? Yeah. Well, if you look at what has been happening right now in the rural areas, the areas that are not really like fully into the grid, what has been happening is that there has been a model known as pay-as-you-go model. Yeah. It's a sort of a hire purchase model, but not really hire purchase as such, whereby you come to a company, they give you a solar panel which has lights and maybe a charging port for you to have to charge your phone, and then they take this and you go with it home, and then every day or every month there's a certain amount of money you send to that company. It's a pay-as-you-go system. Now, that has worked very well for these small systems, a kilowatt, 2 kilowatt, 10 kilowatt, something like this. But when you go to big houses, urban houses, your kind of house, where you're looking at 300,000 shillings, then you have a challenge in the sense that you can't raise that amount. And so what I would say the government would do would be to kind of support a pay-as-you-go system, but for urban households.
All right.
So they underwrite it so that the amount you pay, like 1,000 or 3,000 per month, you now pay it for the next 10 years, but you now are fully on.
Yeah, and I'm told you have to wrap it up because of time, but I'll give you a few seconds to tell us what are some of the expectations ahead of the African Climate Summit, because we are Africa and we have, if not almost as similar, but somehow similar problems when it comes to transitioning to clean energy. Yeah. Okay,
so the African Climate Summit will basically be looking at how countries can double their energy efficiency, as in improve energy efficiency, double the generation of green hydrogen, and triple the use of renewable energy. So that is the main focus. One of the key players in the African Climate Summit will be the African Green Hydrogen Alliance, which is this consortium of 6 countries: South Africa, Namibia, Morocco, Mauritania, Kenya, and Egypt. And so these 6 countries are going to be the one piloting this green hydrogen. We, as an institute, of renewable energy, we are also seeking to give our inputs in terms of like the kind of training we offer, both in renewables and also in climate change, in occupational safety, and also in environment technology.
All right.
And we are hoping that we can make some impact on this.
Dr. Xavier, thank you so much for making time for us. We have to wrap it up. Thank you so much once again for watching KTN News Center. My name is Purity Museo Nzuki. I leave you with this report.